Catalina.
I mentioned during the smokestack some of the headlines to start the show that last night Mitch Harper covers BYU for KSLSports.com caught my attention on some notes involving the quarterback play. Retzlaff and also, of course, former Baylor quarterback Gerry Bohanon. He joins us, Mitch Harper, on 365 Sports. Mitch, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. So where is Gerry Bohanon in this competition?
He's squarely in the mix, and it's a 50-50 wide open competition. Gerry Bohanon coming out of spring ball, he looked like a distant second from Jake Retzlaff. But the health of his shoulder, he got fully healthy in May, he told me earlier this week. And, his health has given him an opportunity to where he's closing the gap on Jake Retzlaff. And some of the plays he showed yesterday almost make me feel like he's trending potentially as the favorite for BYU. So this is a wide open race between him and Jake Retzlaff.
What do you think would make him take over from Jake Retzlaff? What does he do that Jake doesn't?
Well, his running ability. Yesterday, that run, he had about, an estimated 45 yards. I kind of had a tough view on field level at BYU's practice. We got a chance to watch, about 40 minutes of practice yesterday. But just that running ability. I mean, he breaks left, and even if he would have been going live to where the defenders could tackle him, he was far and away, on the distance, he was not going to be caught until late in that run. I mean, just the speed, it reminded me of, what you guys experienced when you saw him in 2021 as Baylor's quarterback. And, because I remember watching that team quite a bit when BYU played in Waco, and he's a great runner. And, Jake Retzlaff's more of a scrambler guy that can kind of improvise and create something, but Bohanon's athleticism stood out yesterday, and it could be a real X factor because BYU's ground attack struggled mightily last season, and Aaron Roderick, the offensive coordinator for BYU, has made it clear this whole entire calendar year they've got to establish the ground attack, and Gerry Bohanon gives them a legit another number that opposing defense would have to account for, and I think that could be maybe the X factor for him to potentially win this job 3 weeks from now when they take on Southern Illinois.
That'd be a pretty amazing, not a surprise. And when he wasn't number one in the depth chart coming out of spring, it wasn't a surprise because of the fact that he was going to a new program. But he is contagious, isn't he, Mitch?
He really is. And, that leadership, it stood out. And I remember, when he left and goes to USF, and I just always thought it was noteworthy that, Dave Aranda – told him who the starter was going to be because it was almost this respect for his leadership and who he was as a man. And Aaron Roderick wanted to get him in that 2022 portal cycle, and he ends up going to USF because BYU had Jaron Hall. But, his personality in the locker room, him and both Retzlaff and him have both are kind of carrying themselves as the leaders, the faces of the program right now. But Bohanon's leadership and, his maturity, he's a father. I mean, there's just a lot to like there with Gerry Bohanon, and you're right, it is contagious, his personality.
Mitch, do you think that that the sixth-year thing also helps him out a little bit?
I think it could, and the fact that they gave him a chance to come here, and it's just, you almost wonder if, them reaching out BYU to bring him in, they wanted to give him a real chance, and Bohanon had no expectations, arriving at BYU. There was no, brand NIL package for him. It was just he wanted an opportunity to win the job and get a chance to play college football again, because up until about November of last year, he didn't know if football was ever going to be in the cards for him again. So this has been something that, he's been really grateful for in the whole process. And you just wonder, though, about the timeline. Does BYU, if they do go with Bohanon as QB1, and let's say in a best case scenario, he plays all 12 games, do they want to get back into the quarterback race debate in 2025? Because I think what the big argument for Retzlaff is if he can continue to build on the experience he had last year and he starts this year, maybe you can establish something. If he can get you to a bowl game, and then 2025, you've maybe got, your QB1 as you kind of get into the guts of the Big 12 of who you're going to be in this new look league. But, I think Kalani's in a situation, and the staff, they just want to get a guy who's going to win ball games, and Bohanon is definitely someone they believe could win games, and same with Retzlaff too.
And, sometimes a guy like Gerry, who has a surprising arm, sometimes look at it that way. He's a pretty big body. He can sneak. You mentioned the 45-yard run yesterday down the sideline. He's smart. As I mentioned, players around him want to play not harder for him than Retzlaff, but they want to play hard for him. But he's not a bus driver. I think he's better than that. I think sometimes we say that, like Trent Dilfer with the Buccaneers when they won a Super Bowl or someone like that. Don't you think he's more than a bus driver?
My tune has changed. I kind of maybe fell into that perception, in spring, because I'll admit he struggled in spring, and there were a lot of shots downfield where they were underthrown passes, and you could tell that shoulder was bothering him, and I struggled to envision a scenario where he was going to be anything more than that game manager that Trent Dilfer was once, as you noted, Smoke, and so I think that Bohanon though has been really productive in this offense. He made it a point of focus to really study this offense. There's a lot of similarities verbiage wise and design plays to what he ran at Baylor in 2021, but maybe some of the nuances and tendencies that Aaron Roderick wants out of the offense, he's kind of had to learn that. But I think he's done a nice job. Him and Retzlaff I've put BYU in a position where they can be in a position to where they're going to be a tough out week after week. I still, it's a tough schedule for BYU, and to expect and say it's a lock that they're going to get to a bowl game, that's still premature. But I think this team's going to be a tougher out this year than what they were in stretches last season, where they go to TCU and they lose by 33. They go to West Virginia and lose by 30. This is going to be a more competitive football team with either Bohanon and Retzlaff. But I think that's a positive thing for BYU, because a couple months back you felt like, man, this could be a team where, with how tough this schedule is, this could really snowball on them week after week in this league. But they're putting some pieces together with the personnel and at quarterback where there's a little bit more confidence brewing.
Mitch, I just need to tell our audience that they saw me jump out of the way. I believe a cricket crawled across my leg in the studio, and I thought I was going to die for a second. So
it was a scorpion.
Yeah, I was like, "What?" And we had one of those in here.
Yeah, we did.
So
yeah.
I'm terrified that it was that. But overall, with this BYU team, I know expectations are not very high, but how would you grade them to what you thought the team was going to be a year ago?
They're improved, and I like BYU's personnel, maybe the second and third units. I think by BYU standards of the past, from where they were, 3 years ago, is kind of a point of reference when they faced Baylor. I think they've made a lot of strides in that area, but I think the top 22 is still a question. Who are the stars on this team? Guys that are going to be household names in the Big 12 conference. Only one preseason all Big 12 pick in Tyler Batty, and I think he's going to be really good for BYU. 5.5 sacks, last season. He told me that he's got to get to double-digit sacks, and BYU hasn't had that from any player since Kalani Sitake took over as the head coach in 2016. They've got to generate a pass rush. I think they've got more options this year to do that, but they got to, kind of identify who those legit stars, who's going to be, a 3,000-yard passer, maybe a 1,000-yard running back. The best BYU teams in the past, they've always had those legit stars, and that's a big question for me when you size up this BYU team, because if you just kind of think who's the best player on BYU's team, you probably pick Batty, but I think there's still more to be had from him. So it's a group on the top end of the roster. They've got to improve, and I think that they made a strong point of emphasis on roster retention. Their collective was able to put together NIL packages together where they maintain this group despite the adversity they faced last season. And they almost feel like, that adversity they faced last year, going through a 5-game skid to close out the year, it's almost like an us against the world mentality they're taking on. And they've shown some positive signs, but it's a difficult schedule. And Tom Holmoe, the AD, did not do Kalani any favors with the way he structured the non-conference with 2 road games. So it's a tough slate. So BYU better be ready out of the gates, because they're going to be in the thick of it when they get to week 2 with SMU.
Mitch, I know they've only been in the conference a short amount of time, but they had played against some Big 12 teams, including Baylor in 21, the year that they accepted the invitation to join the conference. When you travel or cover them on the road, is there a stadium that you have found yourself liking more than maybe not BYU, because that's That's hard to beat, that atmosphere. But do you have right now a favorite place yet in a short amount of time?
I really liked McLean Stadium in 2021, and not just saying that because I'm on with you guys. I really like McLean. Excited to be back in week 5 coming up this September. But I also like West Virginia, just kind of the drive in. I flew into Pittsburgh and seeing those hills and the mountain in the West Virginia. I thought that crowd was interject. I mean, some of the things I was hearing pregame and field level, I was like, I am not in Provo anymore. I thought West Virginia was off the charts. I love Stillwater too at the end of last season. I know there was some really bad weather in that game, but man, late in that game, that was an intense matchup. And I'm loving these Big 12 venues. And, BYU, when they were going up and down the West Coast, they'd go to venues in the Pac-12 footprint, and there was always a kind of a nastiness with those teams. For whatever reason, the Western region has just a real disdain for BYU, some of those fan bases. And whereas the Big 12, maybe there wasn't that pre-existing history with BYU. It's almost learning about the program, and it just seems like there's been not necessarily friendly, because I think BYU eventually wants to get maybe a little bit nasty and be a little bit hated, because that means they're good.
Yep.
But I just think there's just great competition, and I think that this new look 16-team Big 12 is going to be really fun. And I think the physicality of this conference on the on-field product, people on the outside that don't look at this league all the time, they don't realize how physical this conference is. I was talking with Jay Hill, BYU's defensive coordinator, and I think, he even said a couple weeks back that, some of these newcomers in the Big 12, the 4 corner schools, they're going to realize how physical this conference is. I mean, you get some of these, safeties and these 5 defensive back schemes where they could be a DN, they could be a linebacker. And this league's got some really good personnel. The fan bases are passionate. I've loved it so far. And I'm excited to cover this new era of the Big 12. So it's been a lot of fun. I can't wait to see some of these new venues this year.
All right. Good stuff, Mitch. And we will have you on again. We have a lot of great analysts that have come on to talk about BYU, Utah, whatever. But we want you in the rotation. Very good stuff. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Thank you. From KSL Sports,